You're right. I do have a passion for those that work with children that have special needs and those that live with children that have special needs. Like Tim, my family has a history of disabilities also, and that's one of the requirements to have the position that I have. My husband Doug and I have 5 sons. 2 of our sons have disabilities, a learning disability, written expression, dyslexia, and ADHD. So it really is a strong passion of mine. Tim said it's a misunderstood disability. I had a conversation with some of you out here earlier today too, talking about how misunderstood it is. Probably of all the disabilities, it's the most misunderstood, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. I like to bring my personal experiences and professional experiences into the mix of things. Prior to having my family, I was in education, and so that's how I got my start. And then we had our 5 sons and decided I had my own little daycare, nursery school, and my own home for a while there until I got back into education. So just a little bit about our organization. We are a parent training and information center. And if each of you were able to pick up one of our folders, you'll see on the right-hand side, I believe, is information about our organization. There is required under federal law that there be one of us in every state. And that mainly is to provide information to families and professionals about specific disabilities, provide trainings like this, publications, and you will see there should be a publication list in your folder on the right-hand side that shows the different various publications that we have. You can just fill that out, send that in. It's free of charge for parents, but there is a small charge for professionals for those publications. We provide them at our trainings typically. You have the ADHD one here tonight, and so they go along right with our training, other trainings that we provide, and you'll see a list of those in our folder also. You can call us. If you have questions, we have parents call us, we have teachers call us. Yes? Oh, sure, yes. Okay, all right. I've never been told that my mouth wasn't that big before. Today has been a lot of firsts, I'm telling you. It must be because it's Halloween, I guess. All right, so if you were signed up on our website, you are registered. Marsha, did you talk to the ones that were not signed, that were not registered? Okay, they filled that out. Okay, great. So we're good to go with that. At the end of the training, there's an evaluation form that you'll find. If you could fill that out at the end, let me know what you would like to have changed, what you liked about the training. Just give us some feedback. That helps us to continue to keep developing what we're doing. Right. We also have what is called, and it's my turn, transition training. I'd like to talk to you just briefly about. You'll see a listing of our other trainings in there. This one, we go directly into the schools. Tim was a part of this one. Yes. What was your role?
I was Superman.
Superman, yes. And what did you do?
One-arm push-up.
Yes. How long did you practice? How long did you work out to be able to do that?
Not enough, but it took 3 months to recover.
It is a very interactive, hands-on experience where students will learn more about themselves. So it's a real discovery process for them. There are no right or wrong answers, but they're learning about themselves, what their interests are, what areas they need to continue working on so that they can transition out into the world. So any of you that have students or children that are getting into transition age, 14 and up, this is a program that we can provide for in your school districts. So it's something to think about there. My business card is up on the table. If you didn't have an opportunity to pick that up, you can do that later. I would be the person for most of you, I believe, as far as if you have questions to call me about or if you would like trainings for your schools. From looking at the registration, we have a diverse group here. We have teachers, parents, grandparents, service providers. We have a wide range of people, so that's great for our group and having your conversations and sharing your experiences later on, so that's very exciting. So it's great to have all of you here tonight, and we're going to get started. Well, talking about the night of firsts, I was telling Marcia, I've been doing this is my 13th school year with this particular organization, doing trainings, and I have never done this before, but I don't have my flash drive for PowerPoints on the wall, but I do have PowerPoints in your packet, so you can follow along as we talk about things. Your PowerPoints should be in there. just to go right along with. So if you want to get those out, we're going to get started. You'll see there are, well, they used to call them pipe cleaners, these fuzzy sticks. These are here for you to use in whatever way you need to use them. You'll see some little stretchy guys and bendable guys. They're here for you, so go for it. Rather than picking on your neighbor beside you, you can use that. Also, there is peppermint here. I don't know if you've smelled the peppermint, but the peppermint's here if you need to, move it around a little bit, you can. Why do you think we have peppermint? Alertness, yes. Did I hear something? And what else did I hear? Stimulating thinking, yes. Alertness. And who said that? Well, see, you can take it in many forms. Get all your senses involved in it. You can smell it. I like the tasting of it the best, but in many variety of ways. So there's a lot of natural ways we can help stimulate attention and focus without disrupting everyone else in our home or in our classroom. And that's where I hope we can really look at. We're going to look at what it is, what it's all about, why we're misunderstanding it, and also what can we do to support our students, their families, and the schools with this, and do it in as natural of an environment as we possibly can. No one wants to stick out. Our kids, they want to be typical. They want to look as typical as everyone else. So we want to make sure that we're looking at how can we accommodate, meet their needs, teach skills, and do it in the least restrictive way that we can for them. All right. So what is ADHD? We're going to talk a little bit about that. Even though we know about it, I believe it's important to kind of revisit that. It helps us to remember sometimes when we're stressed or frustrated. Anybody get stressed or frustrated when with your children or your students? No one really does? We could just, okay. We all have to, let's just be honest here. It's part of our life. Okay, all right. All right, so we're going to look at some of these things again. And we're focusing mainly on inattentiveness, the impulsivity piece, and the hyperactivity piece. So the DSM-4, there's actual criteria to look at what does it take, meeting these specific criteria to actually get that diagnosis of ADHD. And I'm going to call it ADHD. Like Tim said, what was it called way back then? Hyperkinetic? Yes, it's been, and from way, way back, Fidgety Phil, there was a book written by someone back in the 1800s, and the characteristics were all ADHD characteristics. So it's just continued to evolve and have different names throughout our history. It's always been with us, and we say, well, why do we hear about it now? Well, we heard about it then, it just was called different things. It's always been with us, and we're just recognizing it a lot more. So I'm going to call it ADHD today, so just so you all know, it's called many different things, but that's what we're going to talk about today. It affects 3 to 7% of our kids, so I would guess every classroom is going to have at least one child with ADHD. So it's pretty prevalent. It's real, and when we look at the characteristics, we're going to look at, we're going to be talking about things that we all experience. We all could probably raise our hand if, I asked, can you relate to that? We all have these things. It's just that it's more excessive for our kids, more pronounced, more magnified for them. It happens more often to see these characteristics. It affects their daily life. It will affect their education, it will affect their daily life out there more than it does a typical person that might experience these things. Okay, so.
Dyslexia, is that a whole different category, whole different disability type?
Yes, it is,
Right.
But they can be related. Typically, when a child is diagnosed with ADHD, at least 50% of the time, if not more, there may be something else that's going along with that. So, and with my son, it was that case. We had the ADHD, but we also had a written expression piece with that. And we're going to address that a little bit more later, too. That's a good question. All right, so when we look at the children, who are these children that are diagnosed with it, we're going to look at the inattentive piece first. Many times our kids with only inattentive ADHD might get missed. Why do you think that is? Why might we not see them, or it might take longer to diagnose a child with only inattentive ADHD? We don't have the hyperactivity. Right. That's just, it's another example of, we can all relate to this. It's just more magnified with them.
Often, in my experience, they've been girls who have been very, very quiet, passive learners, good kids, so you kind of overlook them.
Exactly.
They're not making any waves, so.
Yes. You're exactly right. Yes. So.
Can I throw a monkey wrench in here?
Sure.
I noticed that now they're starting to recognize bipolarism in kids. How does that connect to any of these?
Well, there can be dual diagnoses,
Right.
but they are two separate, very separate things, yes. The DSM-4, that manual that, will help with that diagnosis, it has criteria for bipolar, it has criteria for ADHD. They're two completely separate disabilities. All right. So as we're looking at that inattentive child, yes, it can be that little girl in the back where she's not disturbing anyone, and then we finally start to think, well, her grades are slipping. Why is that happening? And looking a little bit further to really figure that piece out. These children, they're not paying attention to the details, or they're paying attention maybe to everything else rather than the most important thing at the moment. So that they're basically really paying attention to a lot of things, and that's getting in the way of attending to where they need to be at that point. They're making careless mistakes, possibly. You ever see a child, they've got the first half of the paper is all correct, and then the second half they're almost all wrong. Why would that be? Is it because they got tired of doing it and they're just not doing it, or what?
They weren't sure.
They weren't sure? It could be. What else?
They can't stay focused.
Right, they've maxed out and they're not able to focus anymore. So really looking at that rather than seeing they don't care, it's more, they've hit their wall and they need a break before they can get going on it. They seem to not be listening. And so many times, the misunderstanding with our kids is it looks like one thing, but it's really something else. So it seems like they're not listening, but what could it really be?
They've heard the first part of what you said, and their mind is still on that, and they're thinking about that. If you're on to second or third
Right.
detail of instructions, but they're focused on that.
It could be, definitely could be. Or the bird flew past the window and it caught their attention. So, who knows what it could be, but their focus changed and they weren't able to hear it. Or, yes, you brought something up and that led them to think about the next step and then the next step and the next step, and they're way down the road and you're still talking about this, but it just triggered some things where they continue to go on to some other places and not even realizing that they're doing that. That difficulty being organized. Anybody live with, experience that disorganization piece? Yes. Mm-hmm. All right. They're avoiding tasks that require sustained effort. Why might they avoid tasks of that nature?
Because they can't stay focused that long.
Because they're not able to stay focused that long. It's really hard. They're working really, really hard to attend and to focus, and that can only last so long, and they might need that break. What do some people think that looks like? What can that look like on the outside? Yes, just being lazy. Or if you just try harder, if you just really cared, you might, yes. It looks very different than what it is. Absolutely, okay. So that sustained effort. They're easily distracted, being forgetful, forgetting things. That memory piece can be quite an issue. And so some children are going to be really magnified in some of those areas. In other areas, you're not going to see a lot of it. So it's going to look a little different in each child, looking at, which characteristics really stand out for them. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. He has ADHD, okay, so I know exactly what's going on here. Not necessarily. Each child is going to be affected a little differently from that. When our son was diagnosed when he was finishing up his 3rd grade year, and when I talked with him after the diagnosis, explained what ADHD was, and we talked, and I said, what do you remember the most about this? And it was about the forgetfulness piece, because that was a real issue for him, that memory, remembering items, organizing and having the things that he needed. So forgetfulness was huge for him, but it may not be for someone else. That organizational piece and sustained effort, Thomas Edison, he had a long table. He was working on this experiment and this experiment and this experiment over here. He would never finish one thing and then move on to the next. How many times do we say, please finish this up before you start the next thing? That never would have worked for him. He could not sustain his attention on one piece for a long amount of time. So he would work a little here, a little here, and a little here, and look what he did. Look what he accomplished. Because he knew himself best. He knew what worked best for him to be successful and to succeed. And it worked for him. Again, what it looks like for one person, it may need to look a little different for someone else. And we're looking at what is the outcome that we want. Always asking ourselves, what is the outcome? And it may just look a little different. We might have to take a little bit different path to get to that same outcome. But that's our goal. All right, so we talked a little bit about the inattentive. Now, the next category of qualifying as the diagnosis of ADHD is looking at the hyperactive impulsive characteristic piece. And this, they're fidgety, they're moving, of course, all the movement pieces, moving, bumping, because they've got all that. They're out there with that movement. They are leaving their seat maybe in the classroom. They might be running about. I remember a student that I had that would just dart back and forth in the classroom. He had all that movement going on. Act as if they're driven by a motor. These are the actual words in the DSM-4. And when I read that the first time, this aha went off, because our son, that was his middle name since he was 10 months old. He started walking when he was 10 months old, and not really walking, he was running when he was 10 months old. And we called him Motor. And so when I read that, driven like a motor, all the bells were going off and everything was lining up with what we knew about him. But that engine keeps going and going and going. They're interrupting, blurting out answers. Anyone have anyone in the classroom that's blurting out those answers? Yeah, interrupting. Mm-hmm. Seems like it might be rude. Why would they be blurting out answers?
Because he knows.
They're excited. They can't control. Okay, so that impulsive piece, it could be, right. The impulsivity of boom, it just comes right out. What else?
The mind is going so fast, they can't stop it, so they have to get something out.
It just has to come out, yes, like that impulsive piece is coming out. Sometimes it could be, if the memory piece is an issue for them and they know it, they're going to be like right out there, I need to get it out because I'm going to forget it. If I don't say it now, it's going to be gone and I'm on to the next thing, and I want to make sure my teacher knows that I know. So it could be, it could be a couple of different things. So if we really understand the child and what characteristics affect them, how they're affected the most by that, we're going to have more of an understanding of why they're doing what they're doing and be able to put strategies in place to help support them with that. So, yes, blurting out answers. There are that impulsivity. It flows over into so many areas. A coworker of mine, her grandson had ADHD with the hyperactivity piece. And he and his brother were playing in a second story bedroom of their home, and they were playing catch, throwing the ball back and forth. The window was open, it was summertime. All of a sudden, his brother threw the ball. It started to go out the window. Where do you think he went?
Right through the window.
He went out the window to get the ball. Now, if we asked him didn't you know that you might get hurt if you went out a second-story window? What would he say? Yes, he would know. He would know that you get hurt when you go out a second-story window. So did he purposely go out the second-story window? No, it's the impulsivity. You know, acting before you're acting before you're thinking. So that might be an extreme example, but it is an example of how they act before they think. So when we have other things that are happening where we know they know the consequences, they might know it's not appropriate, but they do it anyways. It may not be because they're being uncompliant or not wanting to comply. It may be because it was just that impulsive acting rather than thinking it through.
Kids of any age, no matter what if they don't have any one of these, they still act before they think. I mean, even though they don't think about what could happen.
Right. Yes, and that goes right into, that misunderstanding of the disability, that we all have these characteristics. Children have these characteristics, but it's more magnified. And that, to get the diagnosis, that's what it takes. It takes to be that it's really affecting their life. Most people that are impulsive, they might start to, but they're going to stop themselves before they go out the window. Children are going to do that. They're going to, gather themselves in. So there's just that exceedingly piece, and it's not appropriate for their age. He was probably about 8 or 9 years old when he did that. Typically, an 8 or 9-year-old would not be doing that. So it's looking at age appropriateness with the characteristics that we're seeing and how magnified they are. So we also have the third way of having the diagnosis is putting the inattentive, the hyperactive, and impulsive together. You have the combined type. The majority of children are the combined type, but there are the separate also. Why would we want to have a diagnosis? Why would it benefit anyone to have a diagnosis?
So you can learn how to help them.
Exactly, yeah. So we can learn how to help them and understand them. We can put educational plans together. We can do behavior plans. We can, if there are medications that are chosen, that can work. But really understanding that child. When we know the why behind a behavior, it's much easier to implement strategies to support the children to the appropriate behavior that we do want. And so having that diagnosis can be very helpful. It's the one actual disability where typically parents are going to be relieved when they get the diagnosis because they know something's going on, they just can't put their finger on it. And I remember, it's our second son is the one with the ADHD. Our first son, his middle name, rather than motor, was compliant. Positive reinforcement, parenting was easy. And then our second son came and he challenged us to be better parents because of the behaviors that we saw. So I knew something was going on, but I still, even with that, was blaming myself. What am I not doing right? What do I need to do differently? And the inadequacies that I felt because I felt like I didn't have any control over my son. So it was after we got the diagnosis and I started to learn more about it, it was exciting to me because I knew we had possibilities. There were possibilities, there were answers, and to implement those things. So it was very freeing for us, and then to put things in place. It was great for my son because he could then separate himself from his disability. And earlier I talked about the forgetfulness. When we talked about what ADHD was, and I asked, what is the main thing you remember from our conversation? He started to cry. My little tough boy started to cry and said that when I forget things, it's not me, it's the ADHD. So at that moment, in this little guy, he was able to separate himself from the behavior, which is a huge piece for our kids and for us as parents too, and teachers in the classroom, that it isn't, it isn't you, it's it's this ADHD. And not that we're making excuses for it, but that we can put a name to it and now we can do something about it. You know, he is a good person, and he is separate from that ADHD and from those characteristics that he does. So it can be a wonderful thing when our kids really understand it. It's helping them to understand themselves a lot more. And then we can put things in place. One of the first things I decided was, you know, we can't work on everything at once, but what is the most frustrating, stressful time? Well, for us, it was getting ready for bed at night. That nighttime routine was huge. You know, I would say, Lee, why don't you go take your shower? Well, you would expect that they'd go get their shower. And then I'd find him playing with his toys. And I thought it was defiant behavior, it was non-compliance. Until I understood the ADHD and we had the diagnosis. And then I thought, okay, now, you know, what happens from where I ask him to get a shower until he can get to where the shower is? Well, there were all these distractions there. No wonder when you really understand the disability. And so what I did was I set the timer in our kitchen, and he's a very competitive person, and I said, do you think you can have your shower before this timer beeps up here? Of course he could do that. So he got his items, he went, got a shower, came back up, and he was done before that timer went off. We used that technique for probably about 3 or 4 weeks, and we didn't have to use that technique anymore because he got the routine was established, and he was able to do that. He knew when it's time to take my shower, he knew what to do, and he kept it in the forefront of his brain. I think that's the key piece, is how do we help them keep it right here in the forefront of their brain? We're going to talk a little bit more about the brain and how that's involved. But that's a key piece, and then they're able to develop the routine, develop a habit, and then they may not need that accommodation anymore. But they need some sorts of accommodations and supports to develop those habits and routines, to develop the skill that we want. What did we not like? We didn't like that when we asked him to take his shower, he was playing with his toys. So we named what is the behavior that we do want, and what do we need to do, what strategies do we need to put in place to make that happen. Life was so much easier after those few weeks in our home because that was one piece that was taken care of. And then you move on to the next piece. With all of that. So understanding and knowing the why is crucial in developing plans and behavioral strategies. So when we look at their brain development, the ADHD is going to affect brain development. We're looking at dopamine levels and serotonin levels. It's not just words we're talking about here. It's a neurobiological thing. And so when we're looking at brain imageries, they can see the different parts of the brain lighting up differently with someone that has ADHD rather than someone that does not have ADHD. And the dopamine and serotonin are big pieces of that support for a child. And most of that is here in that frontal cortex that we're looking at. The brain maturity of a child with ADHD is 3 to 5 years behind their peers. So that's a really important thing to remember when we're having expectations of their ability levels, especially when it comes to organization and the things that we just talked about, those characteristics we talked about. They just are not where their peers are. So we're setting them up for failure if we're going to expect them to be where their peers are. You know, unless we're teaching the skills and putting supports in place for that to happen. It isn't automatically going to happen. The neurotransmitters, they're firing inconsistently. So the dopamine and serotonin help those neurotransmitters to fire and to connect, and so the messages are going in the brain to do what it needs to do. So there are inconsistencies with that, and that's really pretty much the bottom line with all of that. So that's why they're going to have good days and not so good days. The only real consistency about a child with ADHD is that they're inconsistent. So we've got to expect those inconsistencies. And probably the worst thing a child with ADHD can do is have a good day. Because what do we all say when they have a good day? See, I knew you could do it. Now you can, if you did it today, you can do it tomorrow and the next day. You just got to try harder. You can do it if you want to. If we see that they're able to do that. But it's really important to understand and remember that depending on where their dopamine and serotonin levels are, that's going to be determining how they're going to be functioning for that day.
Is that where the Ritalin comes in?
Yes.
To regulate those levels?
Yes. Those stimulants help to regulate those levels. Absolutely. Yes. So important to remember those pieces. And then we've got that dopamine. That's the receptors that have the chemical messengers used between nerve cells in the brain, and it helps that all come together. And this is where we're looking at the intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. So the dopamine levels help with that. You know, how many of you, yourself or children you know, they just feel good when they get an A on their test or something that they worked really hard on, or they feel really good when they did their chores at home and took responsibility. It feels good when you do those good things. Yes, a lot of students like that. Many times our kids with ADHD, they're not going to intrinsically have that good feeling inside because of that, and that is related to the dopamine piece. So rewards, it may need to be taught. So we're pairing up the positive verbal praises, hugs, those kinds of things to help learn that inside it feels good, along with maybe more external rewards, maybe larger rewards that need to happen to help them to start to learn those things. Like, like you have a reward system set up, you get stickers, and then there's something out here, those kinds of reward systems. You might need to do those sorts of things, but you always pair it up with something like the hug or the verbal praise or the smile, something else to help bring those two together. And just as my son learned the routine of taking a shower, this is the same way. It's not like you always have to give a reward for them to do a certain thing. They start to learn that, and it starts to feel good in here, and they start to understand that. And it starts to develop. So, but the dopamine levels sometimes hinder that feel-good feeling in here and understanding that. The serotonin levels are affected a lot by exposure to stress, violence, those kinds of things. And our kids, do you think they can feel stressed in school? It's just natural for them to feel stressed when they're trying to focus and pay attention and do the right thing. They want to do the right thing. So sometimes it can be a vicious cycle in, they're trying really hard, it's stressing them, and then the serotonin levels go down. But we want them to be built up, because the higher they are, the more they're going to be able to perform the things that we're asking them to or expecting them to. We really need to focus on the positive things, looking at their skills, looking at their strengths, and building on those to help them with, their expectancies in the classroom and at home. So where are their strengths at and their interests? And let's build on those things. How many of you you're a Golden Nugget teacher, you've been exposed to a Golden Nugget teacher with your child? Raise your hands. You're a Golden Nugget teacher? What's a Golden Nugget teacher? Tim, you want to tell us what a Golden... Well, I'll tell you about my Golden Nugget teacher experience, and then maybe you'll be able to relate to it. This was actually our Golden Nugget teacher. Our first experience with one was the year before he was diagnosed. And she called me. It's the beginning of the school year, probably the first couple of weeks. And in the middle of the day, she called me. I'm hearing my son's teacher's voice on the phone. I'm thinking, oh no, what did he do? What did he do? And she said, hi, how you doing? And she said my son's name, and he's here, and he wants to talk with you. I'm like, okay, she's telling him he needs to take responsibility and tell me what he did. He said, Mom, I got 100 on my spelling test. Like, oh, that is awesome. That is so good. And we talked, and I talked with her a little bit, and we hung up. But that was our first experience, and it was such a positive experience with that school year and that teacher. And how do you think that made me feel? I mean, I was ready to I was so excited, because I had heard negative things in the past. He's not able to attend, we're always having someone bring him back on task, those kinds of things. And here I had a teacher that called in the middle of the day sharing good news. So that made me, I wanted to be a team player, and so I'm communicating with her, she's communicating with me. We have such a positive relationship set up. We would strategize in our little third grade seat chairs, after school days, talking about what was going on because we didn't have a diagnosis. And this has been so many years ago, I had not heard of ADHD prior to that. We were looking at what he was eating, what he was doing. She was giving me suggestions for at home. She was telling me about his day, so I really knew what was going on in the classroom, and she really knew what was going on at home. We had a great relationship. Communication was established early and in a positive way, and we were a team. That was before we even had emails. Little notes would come home in a little notebook thing. So now it's so much easier with email. Just shoot something off, and you've got it. So she started a great way of communicating, and I've also heard of superintendents requiring their staffs, because some of our kids, it has to be before the first day, but developing a communication and relationship with the parents, on a positive note first. Let that be your first experience with that parent. And parents the same way. Get involved with your school. Let the teacher know you're out there and that you care and you want to support them and your child in any way that you can. It's not easy. It's not easy at home, and it's not easy at school. And so we've got to be on the same team together, working together to make things happen and to be, as easy as it can be and having things consistent. So getting that communication going, whatever way works best for both parties. It might be an email, it might be a communication book that goes back and forth. It may be every day, it may be once a week, whatever you as a team determines is important for you to know at that time. Right. So practicing routines. We develop those habits, we develop those skills, and routine and practice and repetition is huge for that. When we practice that shower routine, it was every day, it was the same thing. I used the same words, we used the same timer, everything was the same, and he developed the skill. So, getting those routines, having a schedule. They know what's going to happen. They know when they get off that bus what's going to happen at home. This and this and this, as best as possible. I know there are a lot of different schedules, but at the very least, all right, on Mondays this is what it looks like, and on Tuesdays this is what it looks like, but hopefully we can have some consistency, and they know what that routine is. The same thing at school. The more they have those habits and those routines, the easier it's going to be for them to adapt and get on board with things. They may need a visual schedule to see that. They may need, something that they're going to be able to see, whether it's the words or the pictures up there to show them what is that, what's the routine here, and letting them know. And repeating and being consistent. Does anybody have a watch with a second hand? You do? Okay. I'd like you to watch for 10 seconds. You'll tell me when to go. And your name is Lori. Okay. I want everyone else to count how many times I say, pick up your toys. And then you're going to time the 10 seconds. You just tell me when to go.
Okay, start.
Lori, pick up your toys. Lori, I asked you to pick up your toys. Pick up your toys, Lori. Pick up your toys.
Stop.
Okay, so how many times did I say it? 4 times? Okay. 4 times in 10 seconds. And she still didn't pick up her toys. Right. Yes. How do you feel usually if you've asked your child or student to, 4 times to do something and they haven't done it? How are you feeling? Frustrated, yes. But many times they may just have heard the first time you said it in those 10 seconds. Not all children with ADHD, but many of them may have an auditory processing, just a little bit at a slower pace. And so they're going to need that extra time to hear what you're saying. And so she just now heard me say the first time to pick up her toys. Wouldn't it be confusing to a child wondering, why are you so angry at me? I did what you asked me to do, because they really believe they're doing it when right away when you ask them to. So that can be a possibility for a child with ADHD or other children too. So how can you accommodate that? If you know that's what might be going on, how can you accommodate that? What could you do in the classroom, first of all? Or at home, it pretty much is the same thing.
Have them say it back to you so that you know they heard it.
Okay. And that would clarify if they heard things correctly, because they may have tuned out. But what about if it's taking them that length of time to hear it one time? If you're in the classroom and you're giving them a fact, or you're asking them, who was the first president of the United States? What could you do? Because you know what? Who's the first president of the United States? You'd probably raise your hand right away, and I would call on you.
Wait time.
Yes, have that wait time. Because I know I'm going to have those students that are going to raise their hand right away. And it might not be at all because they're smarter, or they know the information more and they studied longer for the test. It may just mean that they need to take some time to be able to actually hear that question. So yeah, just take some time. And it doesn't have to be obvious. You can write something else on the board, or, whatever. Do your counting in your head. Count to 10. Get your 10 seconds in there, and you know they're on an equal playing field. And if they raise their hand, what are you going to do? Call on them. Yes. Yes. So just knowing and understanding that can be helpful with that piece. So we want to make sure we're keeping it simple. So if it's taking some time to process, let's keep it simple. Maybe giving one direction at a time. If we know where they're at with that in that process of things, asking them to repeat, like you had said, will be helpful. And then that will be helpful in checking to see if they really understood the directions. Having the directions visual along with the auditory, so they can see it and hear it, match it up. So just kind of looking at, remembering that piece there could be helpful for them. Looking at the environment. We cannot make anybody do anything. We can't change anybody. We really only have control over ourselves. How we respond to others, the environment that we have set up. So, if we look and understand about, how our environment is affecting a child with ADHD, we can do some controlling of that environment. What does it look like? One of the students I had that when he was in my classroom, he was able to contain himself. When he was in another classroom, he would dart back and forth. It was just huge darting, and they would just bring him back to my room, and he wouldn't do it. But there was a difference in the way the room was set up. That other room had a lot of open space, and it was just really hard for him to control himself and stay in that space. My room had more, blocked off areas in the book area, those kinds of things that made it easier for him to be just a part of that space. How easy is that? To go from darting and maybe hurting someone to just being contained in a room. That only took me as the adult to make a change with that. It didn't take any day-to-day things and all the energy that it takes to tell them what they should be doing or to help an injured child. Was just changing that environment up a little bit. So where are they sitting in the classroom? The area of least distraction, which might be different in every room. Because sometimes we can say, well, why don't we have them sit right by the teacher's desk? That could be the most distracted place in the, depending on how your room's set up, what kind of a classroom you're running. So it's really, let's look at this on an individual basis for the child and for that teacher. How are things structured in there? Let's find the spot that might be the least distractible. And maybe we need to kind of make some makeshift places, or maybe we need to have a couple different places for them, depending on what's going on. Looking at that. The clutter in the room. And this can be a challenge because we have more people, more students in that room than just that one student, don't we? So we're looking at all their needs. A visual learner, I want a lot of things on those walls. I want to see a lot of that. I like to have the clutter around. So how can we make, parts and pieces of that room fit and work for all of our kids? We can have areas that aren't as cluttered as other areas and make it, just kind of brainstorm and be creative. There are no right or wrong answers. It's really looking at who are my students, or what are my children like, and how do I need to create that place? What does that homework place need to look like for our children? Maybe they need music. I know my son, he would tell me, Mom, it's so hard to go to sleep. I need to play music. And I'd be thinking, right, because I know what music does for me. I get wound up. I'm ready to dance. I'm not ready to go to sleep if I hear music. But then I tried it. Said, well, sure, go ahead. Whatever kind of music. I thought soothing music would be best. It wasn't soothing music, but he was able to go to sleep. It really helped him. They know themselves. And it took me a while to trust that, because it went against what I know works for me. So it really is listening to them. They know. I remember him saying, Mom, I love Mountain Dew. It helps calm me down. And I thought, right, I know you love Mountain Dew. You're not going to pull one over on me. And a coworker of mine, I had just met her. We were walking on the parking lot to go into the building. She popped open her trunk, and she had a couple cases of Mountain Dew and Pepsi in her trunk. And she grabbed one of her cans, took it in with her. She said, I have them every morning. It helps me focus. I'm like, oh, and then I understood. It's a stimulant. It's a stimulant like our drugs to help with those dopamine levels. My son knew better than I did what he needed. So really listening, listening to what they need. They know their bodies. And the end result really is, what are our outcomes? If we try this, let's just try it and see what can the outcomes be. And those outcomes will be determining to us. That'll be our data that will say, yes, this is an accommodation that will work, or no, it probably won't. We need to try something else. Give it a try. They definitely know themselves. Putting tennis balls on the bottoms of chairs. I've been in some of the districts, like the new districts with the new chairs. They have those little springy things in them, so all the kids can kind of rock back and forth on it. The tennis balls help with the noise level. Well, my son would say, I don't want to take a test in that regular classroom. It's too noisy. Even though he didn't want to be separated and look different. It was just so stressful to have all that clanging chairs scraping on the floor. He would say, they're always scraping their chairs on the floor like they were doing it on purpose, but it was magnified for him, where someone else, they might hear it or they'll block it out, not even know it's there. But it was too distracting for him to even take his test. But if you want to keep them in that regular classroom, tennis balls helps it slide. So those just creative ways. If you're listening to the child and to what's working and not working, then how can we accommodate that and make that work? So looking at our environment. Don't forget your things on your tables if you have something that you want to share. Organization. Notebook binders. These can be really helpful. This one doesn't have a zipper. That wouldn't work for my son. It might work for some, but that didn't work for mine. We needed a zipper. We had the 3-ring binder, so everything was in it. We had it really was many years ago. Planners weren't in schools. It was a new thing. It was a different thing when he had a planner. But we kept it in his 3-ring binder, because if we didn't, what would have happened?
Buried someplace?
Yes, it wouldn't have came home. It would have been useless. So it was always stayed in there. If he went to his teacher's desk, the whole thing went to the desk, because we kept it in there. But he had his pencil case with the zippers. You can put a lot of things in there. And starting in the 4th grade is when they were changing classes a lot. And so he had most of his materials he needed, but if he had this, he was probably pretty good to go. And the folders, you could have the folders that you can have the 3-ring of a hole punch there and put the folders in. So if it sometimes it only just got in here, at least it was in here, and it was zipped, and it wouldn't get lost and come home. That worked for us. Some people like these. where you can open these up and you can file things in here, put your tabs in and file them in here. Really just have to work with it and see what works for them. Their involvement in it is going to really help with the success of it. They're going to know themselves best and what works best. We were so excited about this working, and then we got to 6th grade, and the note came home with the supplies needed for 6th grade, and it was written really big on that list, "No trappers allowed." I'm thinking, oh no, I know, this is like our lifesaver here. What are we going to do? Well, we talked about it, and it was the issue of there's not enough space for storing things. The desks were very tiny, it wasn't going to work. Well, we worked it out. You just look at what the needs are and address those needs. So it worked. Shorter tasks, making sure we're chunking things. You know, we need to have a baseline. How long can they attend to like a lecture? How long can they attend to their own independent seat work? Well, it might be two very different things and different in each class depending on what's going on. Or how long can they attend and do independent work at home with their homework? Let's know where they're at right now and then figure out where do we want them to be. But expecting them to be able to do more than where they're at right now, we're setting them up for failure and frustration for ourselves. Just like asking a 6-month-old to start walking. It isn't going to happen because they're not ready for it yet. But it can happen, and let's put some strategies in place to help that happen. But if they're able to do 15 minutes of, independent work, great. But are we going to expect them to be there 30 minutes just because the rest of the class can? They probably won't be able to do it. So what can we put in place? What is an accommodation we could use that they're not going to stand out and help support that? What can we do?
I have a student who, this is for vocabulary spelling, he knows that he started out with 10 words. He just, when we take the test, he just does those terms, he just does that much. Now he's adding each week and it's up to him.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else even knows.
Right, so nobody knows. Nobody has to know, do they? No. Yes.
I have students just, when I see them get antsy, I'll just have them go do a little job for me.
Do you like chocolate mints or regular mints?
I like them both.
Well, then you get both. Yes. That was my first experience with our Golden Nugget teacher also. No one knew what was going on, but she knew how long he could attend to his independent seat work. And he was, I think her and the secretary upstairs had a really good relationship that year because all these notes, he was traveling up the steps, going to the secretary's office, delivering the note, coming back down, and then sitting down, and he was able to attend. That took, 5 minutes max? But it helped him, then he could refocus and be part of the group again and do what was expected of him. She would ask him to go straighten up the bookshelves. Probably had the best straightened up bookshelves in the school, but it worked. He had to lift books, move them around. And how do you think he felt when he helped that teacher?
Important.
Yes, he was important. Yes, he felt very good. So that snowballed in a positive direction. That teacher understood his needs. She knew where his ability levels were at the time, put in the accommodation, and then he continued to perform because he had that break and perform like the rest of the children. So it was a really positive experience for him that year. Note cards. Anybody have note cards? Right. Brightly colored note cards, not those plain old boring white ones. They're too boring. They need stimulation. If we don't provide stimulation for them, they're going to find their own way to stimulate. And it may not be what we are looking for or wanting in our classroom. So those note cards, if they're visual learners, do you think that's going to work out for them? Yes. Knowing their learning styles is huge. Then we're going to know how we can accommodate them much better. Do they learn best by seeing, hearing, doing? Learning about that, and then how are we going to accommodate? So the little cards can be helpful in organizing their thoughts, organizing for their study skills. That's great for a visual learner, but what about an auditory learner? Does anybody have anything here that might help with an auditory learner? Or did you see anything on the tables? No. Did you see anything on the tables?
Yes, yeah, recorder.
Yes, especially even if it's just directions, or maybe it's a lecture that if they're an auditory learner, that's going to really help them with studying for tests, because they're not going to learn best by seeing their notes. They're not going to learn best by having little cards with things. If they're an auditory learner, they're going to learn best by hearing it. And why not take notes by hearing? If that's their best way of learning. We're setting things up for them to be a lot harder if we go against the grain of their preferred learning style.
I use note-taking worksheets where it's all laid out and then they just fill in as needed.
Yes, that's awesome. Guided notes. Guided notes is a great way to support them. Some of the words are there, just fill in a couple places. It helps keep them focused and attending, but they don't have to do it all. And if they get off track, there's something there to guide them back on track. I mean, colleges, universities, they use guided notes. So it's an accommodation that can be used that they will be taking into their future if they're choosing to go on to college. So definitely. Or if we're giving them study guides, making sure that the answers are there. I've seen kids very frustrated when they would get a study guide, which was great, so they know what's going to be on the test, but then they have to work even harder than their peers when they're already working harder than their peers to look up the answers and then study. So having those answers there and knowing, what do I need to study? They're already working so hard in that class during that day to focus, to attend, to stay on task, much less, what is the information I'm taking in, and then I need to focus and attend and stay on task when I get out of school for the day to do my homework or to study for my test. So if we can support them in some ways to help make that a little easier and still have the same outcome, what was the outcome? To learn the information. It just might need to look a little different on how they're taking it in or how they're expressing that and sharing that knowledge. What they know. So what does it need to look like? So learning styles, knowing their learning style and how they can best accommodate for that piece. Sometimes we do things to just get through the moment. Do you ever feel that way in the classroom or at home? I just got to get through the moment, and that's what you do. But in the end, what do we really want? We want to help them get through life. What are the skills they're going to need? What accommodations might they need that they can use now and later so that they are successful out there in life? So when we're putting accommodations in place or teaching a skill, that's a good question to ask ourselves. Are we providing something here that is going to help them get through life? Work through life. Social skills. I have a very good friend. She has a son with ADHD, and she told me, she said, I pray every day so he has one good friend. Sometimes the characteristics we're talking about, socially, it can be very challenging for our kids. I know for my son, he made friends really easy. I mean, as an infant, we would go shopping. He was like a magnet. He would draw people in. And he was that way in school. And he's in the 7th grade, we changed schools, again, drawing people in. But it was a challenge to keep friendships. He made friendships easily. But those characteristics, blurting things out, impulsive, bumping into people, those kinds of things, not having the social cues. A lot of times our kids, they don't understand social etiquette. They're not able to read the body language, facial expressions. They don't know how far is too far. They take a joke a little too far. It might be funny at first, but it goes a little too far. All those kinds of things are very typical for children with ADHD. If they're 3 to 5 years behind their peers, I mean, that in itself, that maturity, emotional maturity, is going to play a huge role in their relationships. So, is that a functional skill they're going to need as adults? Yes. They're going to rely on that much more than they are any academic skill, any other knowledge out there, and getting a job and keeping a job. So it's our jobs as the parents and the teachers to help teach them those skills. Typical children will automatically learn those things by being around their peers. They get it. Our kids with ADHD and other children with learning disabilities, more often than not, need to be systematically taught those skills. They're not going to just get it. So breaking it down, where are the areas of need and how can we teach those skills? We can do those things at home, and school is a great natural environment to be working on those things.
We had a parent the other day, some of you were at that meeting with me, and the mother's an educator, and she told her son, if you don't know how to, to read what's going on here, watch what so-and-so does. He's a good role model. And I thought that was kind of interesting that, that was what she was trying to get him to mirror some of the activity or the reactions.
Yes.
Emotional things.
That's a very good accommodation for where do we want him to sit. We want to talk about distractibility, but also who is that peer model that they can look to see what is expected, or this is what we're supposed to be doing right now in case I didn't hear the directions. Definitely, peer role models can be it's a great piece that helps them to continue looking like everyone else there. So, yes, really looking at that social piece. Important. Moving, having movement and sensory breaks. We talked a little bit about taking a break. Well, everybody up. Everybody stand up at your seats. You've been sitting long enough, too. I need everybody to take their right elbow, put it to their left knee. Left elbow to the right knee. Just go back and forth. All right. Did anybody, let's keep going. What are you doing? Yes, say it a little louder.
Both sides of the brain.
That's right. You're working both sides of your brain. You're crossing the midline and you're helping both sides of the brain work together and come together. And you're getting that movement. Brain-based research tells us that when you're moving, it's helping you to retain information. Short-term, long-term memory. And that benefits all children, not just our child with ADHD. They're getting that movement out, and they're like everybody else, but everybody's gaining information. And I can't remember if it was one of our Tiffin private schools that we were talking to. This has been years ago, doing this every day, and the differences they saw in social studies test, the writing samples that I saw. Penmanship, but also expressive written language was a huge difference between doing the brain-based or the brain gym exercises and not doing them. So we can get that movement going, but we can also do it in a purposeful way when we do crossing the midline, doing the lazy 8, these things. Everybody?
It's amazing how many students can't do this.
Yes. And that's a good clue when you're seeing they can't do this. It's a good clue. And do it with the other one. And you want the whole shoulder to be moving. And you're crossing that midline like that. There's really good information out there on brain-based learning, brain gym, that is really helpful and that will work for all kids. All right, if you want to keep doing that, you can. If you want to sit down, you can. It's up to you. All right. A coworker of mine, her son was diagnosed with ADHD, and he was in high school, and the teacher was upset because he was doodling and not paying attention in the lecture times. But the son tried to explain, but that's how I'm paying attention. And there was a misunderstanding because what it looked like, it really did look like he wasn't paying attention. I understand that, but what it looks like and what it is are two different things. Well, they talked about it and then they decided, okay, he can doodle during, lecture time. They actually wrote that on the IEP. And the teacher made sure that it was working because she called on him a lot. And do you think he had the answers?
Oh, yes.
He did have the answers. And so that helped prove, okay, we have the outcomes that we want, so we know it's a good accommodation. Because of course, we don't want him just out there doodling and he's messing around, he's not getting the information. No. So that they tested it and it worked. So it was a good accommodation for him. He was an auditory learner. Taking notes would not have helped him anyways. It wouldn't have been a good way to study. So he did his doodling. That helped him to hear and understand it because that's how he got the information. And he did really well on his tests doing it that way. It was different than the rest of the class, but it is what worked for him. So what are the outcomes? And it might have to look different. My son was involved in track, basketball, football, and the teachers all said we could tell during football season because it was the season where he could attend and focus much more than any other season. Because there was more, there was a lot more energy expelled out there, on those after-school hours. That was helpful. So talking about movement, if we getting our kids involved, there's so much seat time in school, which, we need. So after school, if we can get them involved, whether it's through the school or other activities or just out playing with the neighborhood kids, that they're getting movement going there, being active to help with that. All of that going on. Anybody have any accommodations for movement that they want to share?
We got my son a bounce house, one of those inflatable. So whenever he feels like he's got bunnies inside, we blow it up and he just bounces.
Yes.
Until he feels better, then he gets out.
Good point. Have those bouncy houses?
6.
Trampolines are good, the big ones or even the little ones. Trampolines work. Or if they're studying, just bouncing a basketball. If they're a kinesthetic learner, having that movement can be really helpful. Squeezing those balls. Who's got the squeeze balls? Yes. Yes. They're awesome. Right. We can have boundaries with that. Sometimes they'll attach them to the desk on a string or something so that they stay. But there can be, of course there have to be boundaries. We don't want to see them flying across the room. Typically, if it is an accommodation a student needs, they're not going to want it to go away because they know it helps them and they're going to hold on to that. Make sure that they have that. Who's sitting on the movement accommodation? Somebody's got, You want to share your accommodation?
This one?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not moving much though.
Hold it up high.
Still cold or?
Yeah, I've stored it in freezing and hot weather, and it's just not as good as it used to be. There's if you want to feel it later on, there are little ball-like things in there. You can sit on it, move with it. It really helps with the movement thing. Or the exercise balls. Sometimes students will sit on that rather than the chair. Allowing children to make choices is important. We know that children's behavior improves when they're given choices. Now, we're not saying you want to do your homework or not do your homework. It's more like, where do you want to do your homework? Do you want to do it at the kitchen table? Do you want to go into the quiet den with the door closed? Do you want to use a pencil? Do you want to use a pen? Anybody have some different kinds of utensils or things that they could make choices of that might help them? Did you pick anything up from the tables that might help?
This one you can do. I was thinking of my son doing his spelling words. Instead of just writing it on paper, you could do them with the magnetic letters.
Yes. Yes, I'll hold it up because this is one of my favorites. My son's used this one personally.
I was going to steal it, but
no, you can't. There are too many memories with this one. But they're magnetic letters. Somebody else has a magnetic thing, I bet, here too. Yeah. I mean, that's simple. You can do it on the refrigerator if you're cooking and they're studying their spelling. You can use the cookie sheet if you're traveling in the car. This works. But it's a fun way to study their spelling. The Magnadoodles, we use the Magnadoodles. We use the cookie tray with pudding or whipped cream, and then they can eat it when they're finished. What fun is that? Learning should be fun. Not like I have to do this. We get to do this.
We made
And how can we make it
molecules
fun?
today out of Twizzlers and gummy bears.
Awesome.
And they had to check it with me, then they could eat it.
Yes.
They got to pick
Perfect.
their own colors, you know, and all that stuff.
That reminds me of my golden nugget teacher. He came home from school one day. Typically what I would be doing when he would come home, I would be reteaching. Homework would be reteaching time. And we would spend a lot of time on it. He came home one night, stood right at the kitchen counter, never went any further. I mean, there he was, plopped down his worksheet. And I'm thinking, oh no, science, it's not multiple choice, there are no word banks. I said, where's your book? I don't need my book, Mom. Well, of course you know, they either bring the worksheet home or the book. They don't bring both home the same day. So he said, I don't need it. And he started filling in the answers, and he was excited and he had it done. I said, Lee, what'd you do in science today? He said, well, we had this and this and this, and then we built this volcano, and then we put that in. And like, he was excited, and he learned the information because it was kinesthetic, hands-on. They actually did it. That's his best way of learning. He got the material. And what did he see himself? I'm smart. I can do this. Well, he's just as smart any other day. But if he's going to have to sit and listen to a lecture, that's not his strong way of being smart. And so a lot of days of that, or trying to focus, made it much more challenging. So mixing it up, having multi-sensory ways of learning, huge for our kids. Who has some different ideas here for multi-sensory learning? Anybody pick something up that they could use for?
I didn't realize it was a pen, but if you're trying to do your math facts or something, if you have something that does the same thing over and over and over, that's what I thought this wound up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's, hey, you can use things for multi-purposes, right? Yes, yes. It actually is a pen that you can put around your neck
That was a good idea when I
so you don't lose your pen. Yeah.
We all need that.
Or pin it to you or something. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Multi-sensory vegetable set. You can learn your fractions, cutting them into little pieces. You're actually doing it.
Very colorful.
Very colorful, yes. I mean, the real thing would be best, but if you don't have the real thing, you've got this. So you're actually doing it. Anything else? Any other multi-sensory things?
Mini marshmallows and goldfish crackers,
Yes, perfect. Yes. Math and science seems to be a little easier to do. All right. Okay, so you're going to want to see it, hear it, touch it, all those kinds of things. Presenting new skills or subject matters, we're going to want to, like, one concept at a time. We're going to chunk things. You know, if they need breaks during individual seat work, we're going to, you know, chunking homework, chunking assignments, maybe not seeing the whole page at one time. It might be overwhelming, like, oh, I can't do all of this. Kind of like it's somebody in a wheelchair saying, I have to wheel my chair all the way up that mountain. I might be able to do it one day because I work really, really hard, but I just can't do it every day, all day long. So chunking and breaking things up, making it look a little different on the page is helpful too. Having some white space or just seeing one page at a time can be helpful. Highlighting things, color coding things. If you're going to have, you know, the math book in one color, the folder, you know, those kinds of things, making sure those things are color coded. Post-it notes are great.
Even within the same, like if you're doing math, and you want to try to color code a concept, then to change to a new concept that's in a different color. That's huge with some students.
That's great. That's a great idea. Absolutely. Yes. Right. And letting them take control of what that is. The colors they're making, because they understand their reasoning.
I think it just happened. Like I just showed them, well, you can color code this, and they go, oh, I can do that with this concept. You know, and just, yep, you're right.
Wow.
It works for you.
Yes. That's a great example of they really know themselves, and it's going to be a little different for each person what that needs to look like. Yes, thank you. Right.
I have colored pencils, and if we were taking notes and I didn't put the highlighters out, I would have them underline certain concepts in a certain color.
Mm-hmm. Good idea.
Or, you know, if
we're reading the material. Okay, while we're reading this one, we're going to underline the important things in this color, or vocabulary words in a certain color, and something else in another color.
Yes. I can imagine how that just helps to sustain their attention and focus also.
If they do that for a whole class, they all have their colored pencils, every
Yes, exactly. Because, I don't know if I mentioned this before or not, but what works for children with ADHD works for all kids. It's all good practice. It's not something that's going to harm anyone else. It's only going to be a benefit for everyone else.
I've been studying this thing called whole brain teaching, and it's where you'll take a couple of concepts and you put motions to them.
Yes.
But I teach art, so I mean most kids like art. But like Van Gogh, I go like this when I talk about Van Gogh, that's for the ear, you know. And then I will teach, and they have to turn to their partner, and they can repeat when they have to do all kinds of these hand motions. They can repeat verbatim. They know exactly what I said.
Yes. And you're doing a multi-sensory approach with that too. You're involving that body, and they're not only going to be able to do it then, but they're probably going to retain, the chances of them retaining that information short-term and long-term is going to be much greater because you're including the movement in that.
When I break it up, I tell it by a story, so they can tell the story. We do it all together at the end, and then the next week we start with the beginning of the story, and we may add the middle. And by the time they're done, they're doing this whole dance. But they know, and they can remember through the motions. Even the kids that, you know.
Yes. Yes, because you're hitting their learning styles. The more learning styles you can hit at one time, you're going to reach more students. It's just the way it is. My sister-in-law, her sons are kinesthetic learners too. 2 boys wrestling around on the floor, fighting, like, you know, just play fighting. Yeah, it's horseplay. And she's reading social studies, like studying for a test, and he's like taking a break and he's answering the question as he's, you know, but that's his best way of learning. It was perfect learning. So that's what we talk about, you know, use the trampoline, the basketball, anything. Or you're tapping out, you know, and you're spelling the words if you need to use the body. Get to know their learning styles. It is just the key thing to, you know, having effective, productive, and moving it along and getting that information in there. What's the end result? What's the end goal? We always ask ourselves that again. My son, when we would eat dinner, you know, this is how he'd eat dinner. His knee would be on the chair and he'd be eating like this. But it worked. We had our end result. You know, what do we want? We want him to eat a nutritious meal. We want him to talk with the rest of us around the table, have conversation, and it worked. Now, if I would have asked him to sit here, feet flat on the floor, hands to yourself, I mean, there would have been, you know, spilled milk, arguments. But he was able to he designated his spot, but he could kind of move and eat and have his conversation. So it's, you know, I'm sure in the classroom, if they're in the back, why can't they stand? Do you ever go to a conference? People are sitting for a while, they go in the back and they pace or at least just stand back there. We got the end result, the outcome we need. They're getting the information. It just looks a little different. So again, what is the end result we want? And it might need to look a little different. And not getting into power struggles. I don't know if you've had that issue, but a lot of times, you know, power struggles can happen when we think it needs to be one way and they're, you know, trying something else. Bedtime was really hard. The next thing was keeping him in bed. You know, we got the shower thing worked out, but what about just keeping him in his bed? That was before we had the music piece, you know, and just keeping him there was frustrating. I was home at night, you know, with my son and 4 other children. And what I did, it was a habit and it was a pattern. He knew what the rule was. The rules were posted, you know, school or home, rules can be posted. You know what needs to happen and when it needs to happen. And so then you're not having to get into power struggles and talking and talking. The less talking there is, the better, just point. And I kept it really simple. I love to read. And you know, when you're raising a family, you're working, there's not a lot of time to just read. And so what I decided was I would camp out by his door and I had my book and it was really wonderful. I mean, I enjoyed this strategy here. So I'm sitting there, I'm reading, and of course he would come out like, it's bedtime, Lee. And I go back to reading my book. Come out the next time, I'd say the same thing, go back to my reading. I did not give him any energy. We did not buy into anything. Well, that got really boring after a while. There was nothing for him there, and he stayed in his bed. I mean, right now, just thinking about it, the relief I had with that, because it was a very stressful thing. It was important to me that he get to have his bedtime and be rested for school. I mean, and it was hard for him to calm down. So the music intervention was a great piece to help him with the calming also. But he also knew I wasn't going to buy into it anymore. It wasn't that power struggle, power plays. They can get us into that really quick and easy, and we're in deep before we even realize it. But working through that piece. And being consistent in all settings, that's where our communication between home and school is huge. What are we doing at school? What are we doing at home? Even our word choices. How are we setting things up and the strategies we're using? It's going to be much more effective. We're going to see results much sooner when we're all doing the same things and for the same reasons. Because guarantee you, if you're frustrated at your end, the other party is going to be frustrated about the same things on their end. It's learning the skills. They can learn the skills. We need to provide opportunity and ways to learn those skills. It's just not going to happen the way it does automatically for many other children. Telling them what we want them to know, not what we don't want them to do. In the positive. That helps them understand, because we might just assume they know what is expected, but not necessarily with these kids, because they're not picking it up from around them. They need to be told, and told what it is, not what not to do. Like, not saying, stop kicking your feet against the back of my chair. That's telling what you don't want. Say, please keep your feet on the floor. You're telling them what you want, and it's in a positive way, and it's going to generate more positive energy with them. Catching them being good. It is so easy, because there can be so many times we need to stop something, or we're in that negative mode. We have got to stop and focus on the positive things. The more we focus on them, the more we're going to get those positive things in return. And it's really easy to fall into the negative trap. We have to really sitting back and looking at ourselves. How am I relating with this person? And am I seeing the positive things? And am I saying something about it? It really is about our taking responsibility for ourselves, and how are we responding or being proactive and looking at the good.
You were talking about tell them what we want them to know and not what we don't want them to know. A long time ago I read something that said you can't use the word don't. Like, don't do that,
Right.
because they don't hear the word don't.
That's right.
That's why you have to tell
Yes.
them what you want them to do.
Especially when they're going to go run out in the street. You don't say, don't run out in the street. What do they hear? Run out in the street. Yes. You tell them what you want. So understanding consequences, a lot of the behavior things, sometimes we can be giving them what they want. So we need to be thinking about what are the consequences to what's happening. It needs to be quick, because they're not going to, many times they're not going to be remembering it later down the road. It will not be effective. It needs to happen now. This wait until your dad comes home will not work. Or you're going to go to the principal's office later. That will not work. It needs to happen now, consistently and now. And more concretely. Usually children with ADHD are going to be more concrete learners. So we need to have, it makes sense, it's natural consequence. I know with my son, if I would, my calm voice, reasonable voice, and it was a natural thing, there could be no power struggle, because he knew. It just makes sense. You break that, you fix that. If I would get angry with him and send him to his room because he broke something, that would make no sense, and he would be angry and frustrated, and would cause a whole issue. That we didn't need to, a place we didn't need to go, and using a lot of energy, but having concrete, natural consequences, reasons why, and how can we do this better, having them involved in that conversation is really a key piece, and keeping things together, and developing more relationship, having a relationship with them, knowing that they're loved, are being able to separate them from this disability, are seeing them as a student or our child that we love, and there are these things we need to work on here. How can we together work on this? They know it. They may not be able to read facial and body language things a lot of times, but they know how we feel about them, and they are bombarded throughout their life with a lot of people that don't, that are might be irritated with them, or negative things out there. They need people in their life that know they love them no matter what. I see you. I don't see the ADHD. I see that, and we'll work on that, but I see you. And they're going to pick you out as a teacher or the parent big time and know it. And they'll do whatever they can to their best to do what they can for you. And when you're working together, it's just that teamwork and having strategies to help them with it. I'm seeing some smiles. I guess I'm so passionate about it because I have seen it as a parent and as a teacher. You have so much power to make it or break it in your influence. It's amazing. I've seen it work, I've seen it not work. And it just becomes, when it's not working, it's just frustrating for everyone. But when it's working, it can be gold. Because the kids with ADHD, they have so many gifts. Those characteristics really can be good things. If we hone it into productivity, we look at, like Lee, we could say maybe he's a little bit bossy in a way, but it could be leadership skills. He had an apprenticeship program. After he graduated, he did an apprenticeship program with an electrical company. And they're a big electrical company. They go all over our country. He ended up being a lead person in this crew of his. His first year, they have never allowed it. It's against the rules to be this person your first year. But he was, because the employers saw leadership skills. And this is a boy in the 4th grade who I feared for him because it was not a good school year. He was going down the tubes. And I thought, how am I going to keep his self-esteem intact? And I remember talking to the school psych, and she said, Sandy, he will be okay after he graduates. He'll be in a different environment where he can move, blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking, but I've got 8 more years with him. If they're all like this year, I fear for his life. But that was 1 year, and there were many good years, and people recognizing and looking at his potential and seeing his strengths and helping to guide him and teach him skills to become that leader in that organization. We've got to look at what are these characteristics, how can we make that into a strength for how they're going to use that for their future. And you are good at that as teachers. Parents, you see their strengths. So that's a cool piece of this working together. Because what the parent has and what the school has, bringing that all together, our kids, the possibilities they have, they are our great inventors. They have so much ability out there. But we have to all be together to make that happen. And wow, what an opportunity you all have to be in that role to help make that happen. That's exciting. Are you not excited about that? You think about some of the people that don't understand it, and when our kids see you and they're experiencing you in your home or your classroom, wow, what a powerful thing. Very powerful. They're going to take that with them for the rest of their lives. My son might have had a few years that were not real good, but he had a lot of good years. And those are the things to savor, to take on. And those are the things that he took and is using in his adult life. He has great friends now that he's had for many years. He's going to be in somebody's wedding in a couple weeks, and another person's wedding in a couple weeks after that. He's been married for 5 years, has 2 daughters. They are 3. They're twins. He's always done things fast. He's even had his family fast. But he's happy, and he has relationships. And he's the one that I said could get relationships, but it was kind of hard to keep them sometimes. But it's all possible. We're all working together.
Why would it not be?
Right. It's the most misunderstood disability, too, because some people don't believe it really exists. It's the parents' fault. It's discipline. Parents blame themselves. The divorce rate among families that have children with disabilities is huge. It's like 80%. And I'm going to guess a lot of that is the behavioral issues, because even families may disagree on, it's your parent, if you just let them get away with too much, because it's so deceiving. What it looks like and what it is are two different things. So it's hard for some people to understand. So even accepting and wanting to do some accommodations can be challenging, because everybody wants what's best. And if you don't understand it, you feel like you're giving a crutch or enabling and not teaching them to be successful out there in life. So really it is that understanding. And I was in education. What I learned in school was there are teachable and educable children, because it was way, way back when. I didn't know about other disabilities. I didn't know about ADHD. Everything I learned about my son was because I was a parent at that time, years ago. Now things are more open and many people know about it. But I didn't have a lot of training. And a lot of that comes with the experience. And, whenever we become uncomfortable or we have something in front of us, we can either ignore it or we can decide I want to learn more about it, and how can I learn more so I can provide more and make some differences. Well, that's a good point, because if you want a really good diagnosis, it's real, you go to someone that has a lot of experience with ADHD. I think the form I filled out was 300 questions, and then we gave a form to the school to fill out. You always want to make sure you're getting it from two environments. It's not just a parent's perspective, it's not just a school's perspective. To get a real good diagnosis, we need to see these characteristics in both environments, or maybe it's something else going on. So that for one thing, and someone that's really knowledgeable about it. I went to a psychologist. You can go to neurologist, psychologist. If it's a regular medical doctor, I would strongly suggest there's someone that's been dealing with this for a lot of years. Because yes, they can't just base it on what they see there. We need to really be looking at some scientifically ways that we're determining this. We have that DSM-4, the characteristics we talked about. Those are the things we need to look at. The criteria are, 6 of this to be inattentive, 6 of this and inattentive to be both. There's a lot. And that comes to another point. Someone might not be diagnosed with it because they don't meet that strict criteria. They may only have 3 of this and 3 of this, but there are huge 3 things. And you're seeing things in the classroom, but they don't get that diagnosis. So what do? My son's golden nugget teacher, his very best teacher, was the one before we had the diagnosis. If you see this is what's happening at home or at school, you address it that way. It may not be able to get that full diagnosis, but it's kind of like, it reminds me of autism. You have that whole spectrum. You have this and this and this. I see it the same type of thing, that may not have the diagnosis, but you have strong characteristics that need to be addressed. And so you just address them within your school day or your home life, the way you can best. But definitely you want both environments.